Good morning. Today's date is June 8th, 2006. My name is Thomas Murray. Today I'm conducting an oral interview with Gerald, Kenneth, Engwer. This interview is being held at the Dalton Community Television Studio in Dalton, Massachusetts in association with the Dalton Council on Aging. Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning.
Could you give us your full name and spell your last name, please?
Gerald Kenneth Engwer, E-N-G-W-E-R,
And where do you presently live?
Dalton, Massachusetts.
And what is your date of birth and where were you born?
12/11/21, Beckett, Massachusetts.
Did you grow up and go to school there, Jerry?
Yes, I did.
And what schools did you attend there?
Through the first to the sixth grade at North Beckett Grammar School, and then we went to the village school for the seventh and eighth.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like growing up there at that time?
Well, it was pretty country-like. We lived on a farm. I had about 180 acres that my father had bought. And, we hunted a lot, fished, done gardening. He had cows, pigs, horses, and chickens.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned, how much did he pay for that farm? You said that?
$700, if I remember right.
That was a pretty good price for those days.
Right.
During the Depression, what did your dad do at that
Well,
time?
they done whatever they could. He was in the CC camps during when they were in town, and he also worked for the town of Beckett and town roads.
Mm-hmm.
And later in life, he worked for the state.
You mentioned you went to the CC camps once, and what did you...
We used to go there on a Thursday, I believe, to a movie they had every week. They all invited all the kids in Beckett that wanted to go there. First time I ever see movies.
Uh-huh. It's interesting. Now, were you able to work, or...
Well, I was too young to work. My older brothers worked in the CC camp, WPA projects. One of them went in the CCs. And finally, when I turned 15, I got a job in Huntington unloading cement for a contractor that was building a big bridge there. And
Mm-hmm.
worked there for a few weeks. We worked in the town of Beckett in the summer some.
And then when you got out of school, what did you do?
Well, when I got out of school, we cut the cordwood and logs for Mr. Blue in Beckett. He ran a sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked on filter beds in Dalton, 37, 38. And I also worked for Crane and Company in the rag room, plater room, and hung paper in the loft.
You told a story, I just thought it was interesting, about your grandmother.
Oh, yeah. She lived in Pennsylvania when she was a little girl. Her and her brothers would go out berrying, and they could hear the guns in the Civil War.
Wow.
Yeah. And they always carried a big stick to get rid of the rattlesnakes.
Now, you did mention brothers and sisters. How many brothers and how many sisters did you have?
I had 4 sisters and 3 brothers.
Mm-hmm. And after, well, I'll say the Depression, what did your dad do for a living overall through his years?
Mostly for the town. Then he worked on the state on October Mountain. He worked over there for years.
You had mentioned he also, he was finished up as Miss Hall School, was it?
Yeah, he was a herdsman for a few years down Stockbridge, and then he went to Miss Hall School.
Mm-hmm.
And the last place he worked was Miss Hall School, the night watchman.
Mm-hmm. Was he a veteran, Jerry?
I guess you'd class him as a veteran, but he didn't. He got as far as the boat, and they decided the war ended, so they just shipped them back home. I can't remember them being in uniform. Of course, I wasn't born, so yeah, that's why.
Now, did you graduate from high school? Or?
I didn't get to go to high school. My dad says you can go if you want, but you find your own way. We'd have to go to Chester High.
They didn't have school buses then, huh?
No, I think they did have a bus or something or somebody that carried kids to Chester High, but
Yeah. So you went through the 8th grade?
yeah.
And what year was that?
35.
35? So, and after school, that's when you cut the logs and
Yeah.
did that. What were your dates of service? Were you inducted in?
I was drafted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drafted out of the lead draft board, I think in 1942, September. And in August, September, we went to Springfield. We was sworn in down there. I guess I was the only one that passed. So most of the fellows were 50, 60 years old that went with us. They all got bombed on the way home.
So they were the lucky ones, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I guess they were. Call them lucky.
Yeah. Now you were, when were you discharged? Just so we get that date.
September of 45.
September of 45, okay. Where did you go to boot camp?
We went to Devon's first, and then we got our clothes and stuff there, and then we shipped out for Atlantic City. That's where I had my basic training.
Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ran the boardwalk.
And what type of training did you get there?
It was mostly marching and physicals. I got a test there to see what I was qualified to do. And I've done courier service there, an old jitney car they'd ride you around in, carrying mail and other things from one hotel to the other.
And where did you stay when you were at
Ambassador Hotel.
the Ambassador Hotel? So you'd march.
Red marches on the beach and once in a while out into the water. If you stopped, they'd holler at you.
Was there people on the beaches?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
people sitting around enjoying themselves, and we weren't.
So for you, was it hard to adjust to military life?
A little bit, but I wouldn't say it was too bad. After seeing some of the kids sitting around crying, I never got that sick. I always had plenty to do.
So how long was it down there at?
5 or 6 weeks, counting Devon's and Atlantic City.
Do you remember any of your instructors at all, or?
I can't remember any specific names. It seemed like we had different instructor every day.
Yeah.
Some women instructors, mostly men.
Did you have any graduation type ceremony from there?
I can't remember anything except getting our papers to go to Lincoln, Nebraska. Of course, we didn't know where we was going,
Yeah.
so we almost got there.
Did you get any furlough or time to go home between?
No, I never got home until after I come back from overseas.
Where did you report to next after Atlantic City?
We took a troop train and ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska at the Air Force Technical School on airplane engines, and mostly on engines. I was supposed to be an engine mechanic and go to Europe, but they changed their minds.
So you mentioned it was pretty cold up there too.
It was cold, Lincoln. We had 3 coal stoves in each barracks, and one guy was appointed each night to take care of the coal stoves, and hopefully we had somebody to know how to burn wood and coal, soft coal. Very dirty and dusty.
You told about when you had to clean up for an inspection, yeah.
Oh yeah, we had to mop all the floors, and it was down around 0. We left plenty of water around the doorways, so when the officer come in to check the barracks, he kind of went on his butt.
Was there any sickness or anything up there?
There was. I went around with a fellow that got sick, and all of a sudden they quarantined him, so I couldn't see him anymore. I never did see him again.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was spinal meningitis.
Oh, yeah. So
they were carting him out of there one after the other, and they died.
Wow.
For quite a while.
Mm-hmm. How long was that school, do you remember?
16 weeks, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And then where did you go after that?
We sat around doing a few KPs and stuff. And all of a sudden, one day on the bulletin board, we see where they're looking for gunners. Go to gunnery school, so we volunteered, 19 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we shipped out. We ended up in Las Vegas.
Okay. And,
Gunnery school.
In gunnery school?
Yeah.
And how long of a school was that?
5 weeks, I believe.
And what did that consist of? What did you have to do there?
Well, we started out like going to a carnival with BB guns and compressed air they shot, and like clay pigeons going around the track.
Mm-hmm.
And we graduated to 22 rifles, then 12-gauge shotguns. And we'd get in the back of a truck that had a cage around it, and you'd shoot at clay pigeons being shot out of God only knows where.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be on the left and then the right. You had one fellow loading the guns and another fellow shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Then they'd switch places.
Yeah.
Then we graduated to AT-6s.
What was that, Jerry? That
was an advanced trainer plane, single engine,
mm-hmm.
2-seater. Yeah.
And what did you fire in?
30 caliber machine guns.
And did you shoot at a target or?
A sleeve. They pulled a sleeve with another plane, and they made sure they had a long cable because the new guys weren't too accurate. And all our bullets were dipped in paint. Some were yellow, green, blue, red. And then they'd bring the sleeve back. They could tell whose shot hit the
mm-hmm.
target.
Now, did you have to maintain a score? Or?
Oh, yeah. You had to get so many shots out of it. Well, they give you, I think, 100 rounds of ammunition, which isn't much with a machine gun.
Mm.
You know, we had no trouble, but if they asked you how you was doing, the pilot would, and if you told him you wasn't doing too good, he'd pull you right upside of the target, so you was bound to pass. Everybody passed that I ever saw.
So that was about a 6-week or 5 weeks?
5 weeks, I think,
school?
a little over 5.
Mm-hmm.
We come out of there as buck sergeants.
Buck sergeant. And you come out of there in, that would have been around January of 43?
January or February, we went to a replacement camp in Salt Lake City, and then we went on to start our phase training.
Mm-hmm. And where'd you go for that?
Blythe, California was the first place I can remember going. Mm-hmm. It was hot. I remember it being so hot you couldn't touch the guns. And the only thing they raised out there was watermelons, the farmers. We used to steal them on them and take them up in the ocean, in the air, and cool them off. They finally shipped us out of there. The English refused to trained pilots there.
Because it was so hot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Then we moved to Salinas, California. It was still hot there, but it wasn't as bad.
Mm-hmm.
We flew quite a few missions out of there, training missions.
What'd you train on there?
B-24s.
That's when you started the B-24s?
We didn't have our own plane. We just used whatever plane was available.
Mm-hmm. Now, what type of training was that? Mainly shooting, or?
There was some shooting, but mostly training for the pilots, navigators, and radio men.
Mm-hmm.
We had more training at Davis-Monthan Base in Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you train on? I mean, what did you become?
I become a top turret engineer gunner, they call us.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The other engineer was in the ball turret underneath, and I was in the top.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever shoot out of that ball turret, or ever fly? Try that?
Only one. This was overseas before I got in the ball turret.
Oh, okay.
We used to switch over on an easy mission and see how we get done. I didn't like the ball turret. It was too small and couldn't move around. You couldn't have a big shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I was overseas, we didn't have parachutes anyway. We had them, but we didn't count them.
Mm-hmm.
They were told to stay with the plane if it was in one piece, because you jump out and the Japs would strafe you before you got too far.
Mm-hmm. So after Blythe or Salinas, you went to Tucson? Was
Yeah,
it?
Tucson.
Mm-hmm. For your Phase 3 training?
Yeah. We used to fly from there to Bakersfield, stay overnight, and come back.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a big bombing and shooting range over there.
So that was mainly to train the pilots and
Yeah.
such?
We got to strafe once in a while. Like guy stuck they said we wasn't getting low enough to the ground, so one of the pilots decided he'd satisfy him. He got down low enough to hit a cactus.
That's low.
Brought the cactus back in the nose of the plane. They didn't complain no more about that.
And you told another one about a guy wanting to jump.
Yeah, the little guy, and I can't remember his name, but I kept telling everybody he was going to jump. They thought he was just bluffing, but he did one day out in the desert. He jumped. And a few days later, they brought him back and court-martialed him. I never heard no more about him. I suppose he got out of going overseas that way.
Yeah. And what about the chicken farmer?
There was a big chicken farm out there near Tucson somewhere. We used to get low. They'd want you to get down strafing range, and they flew over his chicken farm by mistake, I guess, the first time, and killed a bunch of his chickens. They flew against the fences, and we were told to stay away from that.
And what about the women's prison?
We didn't stay away from that, but they told us to. We had to get up on the roof. The women would go up there and sunbathe, women prisoners, and we come down over one day and watched them. We didn't. Of course, you only get a shot, and you're gone.
Yeah. So after you did Tucson, you graduated from there, and
Yeah.
and that's where you got your.
We got our flying. Well, the whole crew was together anyway, but we got a 7-day delay en route. And the Red Cross wouldn't give me no money to come home, so some of us had to go somewhere else. I went to Topeka, Kansas with a career gunner. He lived there, and so we had to fly there, but Air Transport Command plane, a big commercial plane. And I think we'd been drinking a little because we got on the plane, we're the only two to get sick. Everybody's looking at us as if to say they're going to protect us.
You had your wings on then.
Yeah, we had our wings on. We were trying to hide them.
So after your leave, where did you report to then?
After the leave, we were all told to report back to Lincoln, Nebraska to pick up our new plane and supplies. And a lot of stuff wasn't ours. We just carried it to California. But we got all our clothes and everything.
Now that was the plane you were going to take overseas?
Yeah.
And what was the number of that plane? Do you remember?
331.
331. So your whole crew had then come together at
Yeah.
that point.
We took off from Lincoln, Nebraska, and got over the Texas Panhandle, and we hit a terrible hailstorm. The hail tore holes in the wings, stabilizers, ailerons, tails, and it still flew. The pilot says another couple of minutes we'll be on the ground, but we come out of it, vibrated all the way to California.
So where'd you go to in California?
Hamilton Field, I think it was, San Francisco.
Mhm.
And we was ready to go overseas then, but they patched the plane up in about a week, I guess. They stuck little patches over all the holes and riveted them, and it still vibrated, but we made it to Hawaii with it.
And what was that incident when you took off to go to out of San Francisco?
Well, the last thing they told us when they briefed us was, don't go under the Golden Gate Bridge, you'll be court-martialed and brought back. And the pilot said, that sounds good. So we went under it with one other crew. There's a lot of room under there, but I was a little weary of cables or something under there. But yeah, we took off, and they never called us back. They told us that halfway to Hawaii there'd be a ship anchored or in that area. In case we had trouble, we could lay inside of it and they'd try to pick us up.
Mhm.
Try, they said. So we didn't have no trouble. The 4 crews of us, 40 men. We got to Hawaii, I think it was in the middle of the day, if I remember right. It took us 12 and a half hours, I think, to get there.
So there was 4 planes.
Yeah.
You had 10
4 B-24s with 4 men, 10 men to a crew.
men to the crew. Now, you mentioned when you flew over Hawaii, you saw the...
Yeah, you could see the ships down underwater from Pearl Harbor. And again, when we took off to continue on, we could see the ships again. We circled over the harbor just to look at them. It was a mess.
So how long did you stay in Hawaii?
15 days. They took one look at our plane and said, you can't fly that thing in combat with all them little patches on it. So they had to put whole sections in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we was there 15 days, and it was very enjoyable there. The weather was nice. The people were very friendly.
Did you get to do anything while you were there, a tour or anything?
Well, we went up to Wheeler Field and looked things over up there that had been pretty well bombed and strafed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you tour any facility,
We went through the Dole pineapple plant.
Mhm.
That was pretty interesting. I didn't realize that there was a factory that big coming out of Beckett.
And what did you get out of the water coolers? You were telling that.
Oh yeah, electric water coolers all had pineapple juice. It was,
No water.
I got sick of it after a while.
And they told you to be kind of careful who you talked to.
Oh yeah.
Over there.
You wasn't sure who was friendly with the Japs, and if you went in to get a haircut or something, it was mostly women. And they'd always be asking you where you came from, where you was going. You wasn't supposed to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
We used to give them some bad information once in a while.
So from there, where did you go?
We took off and flew into the New Hebrides Islands. They were nicknamed Blondie and Dagwood, 2 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and we landed at one of those. And then we started our patrols, sea searches, and convoy covers. It was more or less to get us used to the area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You said sometimes you would carry depth charges?
Depth charges aboard in case we ran into a submarine or something. And one little boat, they didn't want to put a flag up, so we opened the bomb bays and went down over them, and they got a flag. They said it was a friendly ship, but I don't know why they didn't put a flag up. They might have thought we was Japs. I don't know.
Yeah. And you told one day you were out on Thanksgiving. What was that?
Oh, yeah. It was on I believe that was just a normal patrol. Whenever we patrol, we're looking for downs airmen or whatever, pick them up or report them back so somebody could pick them up. You know, they told us in the service that everybody got turkey for Thanksgiving and everything, and we got back and all the turkey was gone. I think we had beer for Thanksgiving. It tasted good though.
Maybe even a little better than the
Probably.
turkey, yeah. Where did you go to then, Jerry, after you...
We moved up after we got a lot of sea searches and stuff. That took a lot of hours. We moved up to Guadalcanal. And we started flying missions out of Guadalcanal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what did you stay in when you were at these facilities? I mean, how did you live?
We had tents. 6 enlisted men to a tent and 4 officers to a tent. And they were up on 50-gallon drums to keep the snakes away from us. Mm-hmm. We had mosquito bars. After you get in every night, you have to check, make sure there's no mosquitoes inside, because practically everybody got malaria. Mm-hmm. Some didn't come out on them.
Now, did you have bunkers that you had to get into?
Yeah, we had bunkers. When we got there, nobody ever thought to look in the bunker. The first time they just bombed us, the guys jumped in the bunker and they were in about 2 feet of muddy water. They didn't stay in there too long. They just had the bombs hitting them. Then we had blister bags there for our drinking water, which was, you'd pick up the corner of the canvas cover over them, and the water was lukewarm, and if it didn't come out the spigot to your cup, you'd look down in there and there'd be lizards floating around in there. I wouldn't say it was too good of water.
Now, how many missions did you fly altogether? Do you?
I had 51 combat missions, mm-hmm. and not counting the sea searches, of course, different. Yeah.
And you told about fighter cover. How often did you have fighter cover?
I think we had fighter cover, I was told 14 missions out of 51. Mm-hmm. Most of them are too long of missions for the fighter planes. And sometimes some of the ones we did have, we'd take off in the morning and they'd take off later and pass us, get there just when we did. And they'd take one pass and then head back home because they were running low on fuel. Mm-hmm. We'd see them drop their extra tanks. We knew they were going to take off.
And how long were your missions?
I'd say they averaged 12 hours, 10, 12-hour missions, mm-hmm. up as high as 14. And we come in one day, and we're taxiing in to park the plane, and the engines quit. They're out of gas. That's too close.
So
the gas gauges was very inaccurate. Mm-hmm. You had to have the plane perfectly level. And
now you had a couple stories that the Russian butter.
Oh yeah. They'd give you toast in the morning or some kind of rolls or something, and the butter, you'd take a bite and it'd stick right to the roof of your mouth. It was real thick. I think they got it mixed up with the cosmoline we put in the gun barrels.
And Japanese prisoners, you had Japanese prisoners there?
Yeah, they had a stockade not on every island we was on, but I know on Bougainville they had a Jap prison there with a bunch of Imperial Marines in there. We used to throw them our old razor blades so they could shave each other. Yeah.
And what about the Amelia Earhart? They told you to...
That's when we first got overseas. No more we got to New Hebrides Islands. They says, watch out for, when you're flying over the jungle, any planes you see down, report them because they're looking for Amelia Earhart. Her co-pilot there, Paul Noonan, I think his name was. Yeah.
So what islands did you start bombing from Guadalcanal when you were there?
Started bombing Munda to start with. That was the short missions. And then we went to Bougainville, Admiralty Islands. And then we pulled a daylight raid on Truk, which was the first one. And we also bombed Hollandia. That was before the invasion. That's when you could tell they were going to invade because it'd send you out all night long, drop one bomb, go out, circle around, come back another hour later and drop on a second one to keep the Japs awake. Mm-hmm. And then when they invaded, I suppose they were tired out.
Right. So you flew both night and day?
Yeah. They did actually send us out in lousy weather because they figured the Japs wouldn't be expecting us, which I didn't like that because you were flying in electric storms. And when you come in for a landing, we had landing lights, big lights, to show you the runway, but they could only flash them on for 2-3 seconds because the Japs would shoot at them, shoot them out. So everybody's looking for the light and tell the pilot just where it was. We had good pilots. I flew with several different pilots at different times.
You had another story looking through the binoculars.
Yeah, we had a mission when there wasn't no fighter cover or no enemy fighters. So I'd lay on the quarterdeck, open the bomb bays, and look down at the Japs trying to get away from our bombs. And I see one truck drove right up a tree like. I don't know if the tree started to bend or what, but he's standing up on end.
Now, this is, you said this was always kind of hard to talk about, and but you had to identify crew members and the such like.
Yeah, they'd bring them in. We didn't have many on our ship that got killed, but the ones on other ships. And when they come down, the ones that weren't wounded, they would take away and brief them. And they made our crew and others that didn't get damaged go in and help identify the bodies and then flush out the planes. Mm-hmm. Those planes, after a few hours on the ground, those planes get pretty ripe. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then you moved from Guadalcanal. Where'd you go to then? Do you remember?
Well, after we bombed Truk, that was one of our last bombing missions. Finally, we got our points in and we got grounded.
But didn't you go up to Munda?
Yeah, well, we kept moving.
Moving up the...
We moved to Munda, we moved to Bougainville, mm-hmm. and we flew several missions out of Bougainville. Then we went up to the Admiralty Islands. Munda Island was... There'd been a lot of fighting there, but it was over when we got there. You know, at the first dismounted cavalry there. Mm-hmm. They done a lot of the fighting, I guess.
Now, you mentioned, too, that they'd have certain spots for downed fighters to...
Yeah, they had advanced bases, which was actually fighter bases. And they weren't... The runways were only short, probably 4,000 feet or 3 or 4. And it wasn't long enough for a B-24. But on the way back, if you got shot up bad enough, you'd have to crash land on them or near them. And we had one plane crash there. They salvaged, the crew got out. They brought them back. Then they wanted to get the plane back because they could use it for parts. We went up and flew it back. We had a skeleton crew.
You had mechanics with you to fix
Took
it?
mechanics with us, and there was practically no instruments on the plane that was working. And it was all shot up and vibrated in it. The landing gear come down, but the brakes didn't work right, but we got it in anyway.
Now, when you took off on those short runways, how would you do that if...
We used to have what they call a mule, just a truck with a tow bar and hook onto the nose wheel of our B-24s and push them back up into the jungle as far as the little tail started hitting the trees. And then they'd bulldoze coral out on the other end of the runway to make the runways a little bit longer. And we'd rev the engines wide open, no flaps or nothing, and we got partway down the runway and they'd have flags there. If you wasn't going at least 60 miles an hour when you passed the flags, you put your brakes on, come back and try again.
Mm-hmm. So you made it off all right, obviously. With the,
oh yeah, we got the thing in the air. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a very fancy takeoff.
Now you mentioned you were one of the first ones to bomb truck, right?
First daylight raid on truck, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what we got the unit citation.
Presidential. Yeah. Now, did you ever get shot down or?
No, we got shot up a lot. They used to joke about that, getting shot up or down. I'd rather get shot up myself. But we had to land once with one landing gear down and one up. And we done a good job until it slowed up and we had to drop that wheel, looped around. Mm-hmm. You know, and we gave the Navy boys a ride. They never forgot.
What was that ride?
Well, 8 or 10 of them wanted to ride in a B-24, so we got permission. They signed papers, and we took them up for a ride. We were checking out a B-24 that had brake trouble. And the first time we landed, it was pretty good. We done a good job, and he took off again. We come in, put the brakes on. They didn't work very good. Pulled us to one side. We ended up going over the bank through a bunch of gas drums they had at the end of the runway, and nosing the plane over, and all the sailors are in the back, about 15, 20 feet in the air. They were jumping out like fiends. They never asked for another ride.
Now, did you lose anybody on your crew?
We lost 2 men, but they weren't in our plane at the time. Mm-hmm. They would break up a new crew, and there'd be they didn't want a new crew to fly as a crew. They'd break them up. So there'd be experienced men, experienced pilot, experienced radio man, and so on. Yeah. And we come home on a point system. Every 100 hours was a point. Every 3 months overseas was a point. And every 100 hours in the air was a point, I think it was. And the first time they grounded me to let a new guy take my place, plane didn't come back. I complained about it, but they said that's the way it works. So after that, I didn't complain the next time, and sure enough, the plane didn't come back. Mm-hmm. We lost 2 of our crew. Mm-hmm. The career gunner and the other engineer. Both nice fellows.
Okay, you had some other stories that I took some notes. The flight surgeon.
We had a flight surgeon, regular one there, and I think he got shot down, if I remember right. So they brought in a new one. He was a psychiatrist in private life. And he liked to train doing psychiatry. He'd give us a whole bunch of cards to read, and you put them in two piles, yes or no. And he'd ask you crazy questions like, would you rather be over here than home? So the first guys that take the test would tell us what was going on. So when we went in, we'd say, yeah, we'd rather be here than home. We all stayed there anyway, it didn't matter.
Now, you had an interesting story about getting your flight or flak suit jacket.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We had roughly 25 missions, and they finally dug up some flak suits somewhere and sent them over to us. And we didn't have enough to go around to start with. But one of the first missions when our crew got them, a piece of shrapnel from an aircraft shell exploded, and a piece of shrapnel come through the co-pilot's window and hit him right in the chest, knocked him completely out. And I remember the pilot screaming at me to get down there and get him off the controls because we were going down. Mm-hmm. He fell ahead, and I got him back in his seat. He was out. I figured he's dead. And he finally started grunting and coming to. And we took the flak suit off him, and they bent the steel plates underneath. It would have went right through him if it hadn't been for the flak suit.
Yeah, so that ironic that was the first time you had them.
As soon as I got some extra suits, I used to sit on one and have one on. Mm-hmm. Then he got bit with a scorpion one day, or a centipede, I don't know what it was. We'd just taken off, and evidently it was in the cabin, and went up his pants leg and bit him on the knee. Grace, his knee swelled up, so we had to cut his pants off him. Mm. Yeah, that was our co-pilot. Mm-hmm. And we rushed him back to the base, and it was about a week before he could fly again. They used some kind of serum to fight it.
And you told some stories about running out of ammunition.
Oh yeah, that happened twice that I know of. We'd run out of ammunition, the Japs would run out of ammunition. And they'd come along and fly right up beside of us, within a few 100 feet of us. And the Jap pilot would wave, and we'd wave back at him. The radio operator grabbed a machine gun off our Thompson sub, which we carried on the quarterdeck, and started shooting at him, and he took off.
And they would not only try to shoot at you, they had other ways of trying to bring you down.
Oh yeah, they tried to, quite a lot of phosphorus. They put a phosphorus bomb under a Jap fighter, and they'd come in at you and throw their belly out, just like throwing a football. And if that hit the plane, I've seen planes hit with it, and it burned the wing right off them. Mm. We just put our wingtip through one. It's just like a big octopus. It would go down streamers. And we just stuck the wingtip into one day, and when we got back, the aluminum on the wing was all full of holes, pop mark. Mm. And then they tried towing cables up, dropping them ahead of us. I don't think they ever used the chaff like we did. Aluminum foil, we dump it out to try to goof up their radar. Mm-hmm. We had an IFF, a little box in each plane that sent out an impulse to let your ground crew or the crews on the ground and at the tower know that it was a friendly plane coming in. Mm-hmm. The Japs knew that too, and they tried to sneak along in with us.
Oh, yeah. Now, if you really couldn't fly, could you get out of it, or I mean, was there?
Yeah, I've seen new crews go on a tough mission, first mission. When we first got over there, we'd fly as a crew, new man. they didn't split us up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that was the reason. They come back, and I remember the pilot saying, "We're not going up there again." And they didn't bust them. They made some do ground duty or something.
Mm-hmm.
But they were pretty good about it.
What were some of the fighter cover planes that you did have when you were able to have them?
We had the F-4Us flown by the Australians usually. Mm-hmm. We had P-40s. We had some of the old shark mouth P-40s and some of the newer models. And then we had the P-38s, which was flown by Americans. And once in a great while, they didn't actually fly cover for us, the P-61 night fighters.
Mm-hmm. They were like a bomber too, you were saying?
Yeah, they were like a light bomber.
Mm-hmm.
They had machine guns and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we liked the Australians. They stayed with us and covered us when we had the missions when we had them.
Mm-hmm. And what was the air group, bomb group that you were in?
I was in the 370th Squadron, 307th Bomb Group.
Mm-hmm.
It was 13th Air Force was very small. If we got a dozen planes in the air at once, it was a big day. I think when we bombed Truk, it was 18 of us started out. I don't know where they got the other planes, but they got everything they could in the air, and some of them turned back or had motor trouble. Or if you turn the plane around, it was the pilot, turn the plane around and bring it back, say there's something wrong with it. There better be something wrong with it. Because they'd pull a fast one once in a while, they figure it's going to be a tough mission.
Mm.
Yeah.
So after you got so many missions, did you get some rest leave or?
Yeah, about 25 missions. I think we went to New Zealand. We stayed there for maybe 6, 7 days. And then at probably 40 missions or so, we went to Sydney, Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it down there.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you flew over the general's house there?
Yeah, General MacArthur's. That was in New Guinea.
Oh.
He had a beautiful home there in New Guinea, all blacktop driveways and everything. I don't know where he got the stuff. Patrika didn't do it.
Now, when you went to Australia, you mentioned you could either stay in a hotel or in private.
Yeah, we could stay either place, and we looked the hotels over. They were nice. There was no heat in them. It was their winter down there in July, I think it was, August. And we looked at the list of private homes, and there was one with a couple of daughters, and we decided we'd try that. I think 3 of us went there, and they knew their horses well. They could, every Saturday was race day down in Australia. I guess not just Sydney, but all over. Nothing's open, no barbershops, no stores. We says, what's going on? What kind of a holiday is this? And they says, it's race day, Saturday. So we made a few dollars betting on the horses. Because the girls didn't have much money. The oldest girl worked in the factory. She made, I think she told me, like $14 a week as a boss. So imagine what the help got. Worse than the state. Yeah.
So how many, you mentioned you were credited with shooting down?
I was credited with shooting down 3 planes, but there was a lot more that I shot at and pretty sure hit. But if you didn't see them explode or hit the water or the ground, you didn't get credit. Mm-hmm. The ball gunner down underneath and the waist gunners could look down and see them hitting the water. And I got that one, I got that one. They got a lot of them.
So they're the ones that got the credit. Mm-mm. Now again, we got some more stories I'd like you to just tell about. And the new planes, when...
Yeah, we got the new planes come over, B-24Js. We had the old D models. Some of them didn't have turrets in the front or the back, either one. The new J models had turrets all over and more guns. And Some of them weren't even painted. They come through with regular aluminum. They park them out in the jungle, and we went out looking at them one day, and somebody says, "When are we going to get to fly those?" "You got to get rid of the old ones first." "How do you get rid of an old plane?" "Shoot it down."
So you kept your old plane
Yeah.
for the old one.
We did fly in the new ones towards the end. The last 5 or 6 missions, the oldest crew always flew with the commanding officer. And I didn't like that. You had to salute and all this junk. But I think the Japs knew that who was in the lead plane as well as we did, because they always seemed to aim for it.
So that wasn't a good place to be then. Now the tough mission whiskey story, what was that about?
After almost every mission, they would give you a little liquor. Mission whiskey, they call it. And you'd go down to the flight surgeon's tent, and if you had a bad mission like truck or Rabaul or something, where there was a lot of fighters, he'd fill your canteen cup half full or so of mission whiskey, probably 6-8 ounces, where you'd only ordinarily get 2. And I didn't hardly ever drink mine. I used to save it, get a quart, put it in a bottle, and I'd give it to the ground crew or sell it to somebody, but the ground crew done their work. Mm-hmm. They kept our planes running, and they were very good. I've seen them work all night to get a plane ready for the next morning. Mm-hmm. And
so you took care of them.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That and sunglasses. They didn't get issued sunglasses, and we did. They were very expensive. I just say, I lost my sunglasses on a mission, and they give you a new pair. Take them down, give them to the crew chief.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said they used to have some pretty high-stake blackjack games, too.
Oh, I guess so. I couldn't believe it the first time I went to a blackjack game, not to play, just to watch. There was so many men playing blackjack at that one tent. They had 2 decks of cards. And when you had to pay the board, like maybe $1,000 or better in the pot, you wanted some money. And I see them play there with 45s, loaded 45s laying on the table.
What'd you do with your money? You were...
I sent, quite a lot of it I sent home. And there was nothing to do with money over there except buy cigarettes, 50 cents a carton. So I sent some money home to my brother, and he used to put it in the bank for me. And he wrote me a letter one day and says, "They won't accept any more money at the bank." That's the popcorn bank in Pittsfield. Mm-hmm. So he said, "I'll take it across the street to the bank at corner of West Street where the clock is." They said, "We'll take all the money you can bring in." I never heard of such a thing, but I never found out why. They must have had a reason.
Yeah. And your chocolate bars, how would you mention the...
Yeah, we had tropical chocolate in the K-rations, which was hard and it didn't melt. But you could buy chocolates at the PX tent, I don't know, $1 or $2 a can. Looked like a coffee can, vacuum packed. And as long as that seal wasn't broken, they would stay nice. As soon as you opened the can, you had to eat them fast, or they'd all get mushy.
Mm. And you said you remember the gardens on Guadalcanal.
Yeah, they must have had, I don't know what outfit it was, but they raised all kind of vegetables on the canal. And when we was stationed there at the end, before we come back from overseas, we had all kind of vegetables to eat. And vegetables was way better than ever raised in Beckett, I know that. Big tomatoes and squash, cucumbers. They had, I guess, a volcanic ash, must have been. Because I don't think they had fertilizer that I know of.
And you mentioned storing the tires that you wouldn't think about over here, but...
Yeah, we had of course, you had the airplane tires, truck tires, Jeep tires, command car tires. They'd throw them in a big pit. They'd dig with a bulldozer and fill it with water, throw them in there. When they needed a tire, so they needed a 10-20 truck tire, they'd just fish in there until they fished out the right size, throw the rest back. That kept the tires from dry rotting.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the reason for that.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you'd have bombs that would go bad.
We had only one mission when they gave us a special bomb. I think they were 250 pounders, and they had a plastic end on them screwed in where the fuse goes, and they had a chemical in there that would gradually eat through and set the bomb off. They were used to drop in areas, and they'd lay there maybe 2 days or so before they'd explode.
Oh.
And we got started raining, runways got muddy, we couldn't take off, and the armament guys would come by and check them, and when they see them start to turn color, they look like rock salt inside of them. When they started to turn color, they got excited and unloaded them, hauled them way off into the jungle. That night, about midnight, they started going off. What a racket. First, we thought the Japs were attacked, and then we realized what was going on. Mm-hmm. They also gave us a bomb for personnel, set fires. It was a 100-pound bomb. You could pick it up and shake it. You could hear the gasoline running back and forth, and gas and rubber, they said, mixture. And say you explode one of those maybe 50 feet above the land, and it would stick to trees or buildings and set fires.
Oh, yeah.
We had one go off in the bomb bay of a plane one day. Not our plane, but a 100-pounder went off in there. They got the plane back and blew big holes in the side of it. They got the fire out with fire extinguishers. They brought the plane back in. Mm-hmm. But they didn't use them only that one time that I can remember them.
And fueling the planes, that was kind of dangerous at times.
Yes, it could be. We had 2 fellas killed gassing up the planes at night. They evidently had nails in their shoes, and a spark must have ignited something that, unless they were smoking, but I don't think they'd be that dumb. 100-octane gas is very volatile. Yeah.
So then they made them.
Oh yeah, go stocking feet. Yeah. We had to go up on the wings before every mission and make sure that they had safety wired the big covers on the gas tanks, because you didn't want that stuff coming out into the superchargers when you took off. Many times, well, not many, but I can think of 8 or 10 times when the 24s would be taken off early in the morning. It'd be dark, and a couple of them wouldn't make it. They'd go down into the ocean, and they saved a few of the men, but usually they'd blow up, just full of gas. Yeah. B-24 isn't very good for ditching in the water. The Bombay doors are too flimsy. They close hydraulically. If you crash land without wheels, usually it broke open and then flood you out pretty quick. Yeah.
Now, you had a story about Eleanor Roosevelt visiting.
Yes, poor old girl. She come over there. She come in one day with a fighter cover. You might think it was the President of the United States because of his wife, but yeah, she landed there and she made a speech. We were told to go down and see her. Most of them did, but I didn't bother to go down. She dedicated a tree to the servicemen on Guadalcanal that lost their lives. She planted a little tree there. I don't know what kind of a tree it was, but... And after she left, the guy that wrote the something like the Stars and Stripes. It was a little paper they put out every week. And he wrote that they should have sent the tree back to the States and buried Eleanor on the island. And that didn't go over too big. He got busted down and made a cook out of him. The last I know, he was baking bread. They baked the bread in big brick ovens in underground.
Uh-huh.
And they done a good job of it. Of course, Wonder Bread and Bond didn't deliver.
And you mentioned a guy, it wasn't on your plane, but he got shot in the stomach.
Yeah, 20 millimeter cannon shell come through the bulletproof glass, which was probably 6 inches thick. And it would stop a machine gun bullet. But this 20 millimeter cannon shell come through, right in the corner. And it got him in the stomach, and it didn't explode. So the pilot turned the plane around and rushed him back to the island. And they said he lived. But they gave the pilot a medal for saving his life, and turned around and told him he had to pay for the engines he burned up coming back. I don't think he ever did.
And then there was a commander's dog that got...
Yeah, we had a few dogs on the island, not too many. Evidently, most of the dogs had been from the plantation owners had them. Cows, dogs, chickens, horses. But this commanding officer had a little poodle dog. And he'd bark every morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, that dog would be barking. And the guy got sick of listening to it. So one night, they took a gun and shot the dog. In the morning, he come around, the commanding officer with the MPs, checking all our guns, sniffing at the barrels, see if our guns have been shot. So, and then he started up our way, and by the time he got down the other end, the guys heard about it, and they all went out and started shooting their guns. He never did find out who killed his dog.
So after you mentioned the points, so you finally come up on points?
Yeah, we got enough points to come home. They wouldn't tell you how many points you needed to come home. At the end of the month, they would post on a bulletin board who was eligible to come home. Maybe there'd be 4 or 5 guys out of the outfit. And you had to wait till the last mission of the month. And we'd land the planes, and everybody'd rush down to the bulletin board and see if their name was there. And finally, I got my name on there. I was eligible to come home, pending replacements would turn up. That was a big item. If your replacement didn't show up, you stayed another month. Right. You might have to fly 2 or 3 missions that month. You didn't know. Took me 13 months, I think, to fly 51 missions. So there's lots of times when you didn't fly. In a rainy season, we had landing mats. We'd land the planes on steel mats, but they weren't too good.
Mm-hmm. So did you go right off once you got your points? Or?
No, 4 months, I think, I sat over there on Guadalcanal. And we volunteered finally to go to Australia for supplies with a C-47, a cargo plane. And we flew 3 or 4 times down there. We'd fly down there, and I remember the pilot saying, "Do you want to stay down here, or do you want to go back to the island right away?" And we said, "Well, we'd try to stay here." He says, "I'll fix it." He taxied in a little too close and broke the wingtip on our plane. I forget now, it took them 3 or 4 days to get a wingtip. They took it off another plane and riveted it on our plane so we could get back to the island. We thought they'd take them longer.
So you did that on purpose, huh?
Yeah. He said it was an accident.
Now, you used to buy some side things, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, we'd buy cheap liquor and air mattresses, cigarette lighters, anything that would sell watches was a big item. You could buy a watch for $5 in Australia and sell it for 50 up on the island, no problem. But they only lasted about, the springs always went in them. They weren't Timexes, I guess.
So you finally you did get out of there. How did you get out of the?
Well, they told us they had a B-24 that they converted to a cargo plane. They were going to fly mail back to the States. So we got permission to get on it. There were no seats. They'd taken all the seats out of it. Of course, the B-24 didn't have any seats anyway, but we sat on mail bags and we flew to Hawaii with it. And that must have been relative with the plane we had. It vibrated all the way to Hawaii after flying in the good planes. But we landed in Hawaii with it. We was there a couple of days. We had to go down and stand in line to get a plane back to the States, commercial plane. And some of the big shot officers waiting to come back to the States, they didn't like it because they put us at the head of the line because we were combat crews.
So you got back to San Francisco, and then what happened then?
We got back to San Francisco on Jewish holiday, I think it was. And we asked if we could fly a plane back to the East Coast, the ones that lived out this way. They said it was too dangerous to fly. So we got on a Pullman train on a Friday. Monday afternoon, we pulled into Fort Devens. We didn't have to change trains, but we had to change cars in Chicago, LaSalle Station.
So you got back to Devens, and then?
We got back to Devens. We got a 30-day delay en route. We made it home. My folks lived in Lennoxdale at the time. We had a good 30 days, and then we had to go back to.
You had a story at home. Your dad let you use his Buick.
Yeah, he had a nice Buick Century, which I bought later when I got out of the service from. The gas was very short. But my younger brother, he hadn't gone to service. He says, go see the barber up in Lennox. He'll sell you some gas stamps. So I had plenty of gas. I picked up some GE guys one day and gave them a ride, and they were very appreciative. Yeah.
So after your 30 days?
Back to Atlantic City.
Back to Atlantic City.
We went down there, and I couldn't believe it. We went in the same hotel, Ambassador, that I went through basic training. In the meantime, they had replaced all the fixtures in there, and they had men and women both taking care of us, making our beds. We didn't have to do nothing. You could go down in the lobby of the hotel and get all sorts of goodies to eat, fruit, vegetables, anything you wanted to eat. I think that was 15 days. Then we was back in the Army again. They shipped us to Biloxi, Mississippi. The only camp, they said, where the chaplain went over the hill. They said that was true. The chaplain couldn't take up.
So what'd you do at Biloxi?
I trained on a C-46, something like a C-47, twin-engine cargo plane. But it was mostly hydraulics. I didn't like it, but we went through phase training on it. While there, we watched a B-29 come in with an engine burn off it. Just happened to land there. We graduated from the C-46 school, and they shipped us off to Florida.
Where was it in Florida you went?
West Palm Beach.
And what did you do there?
They had us putting new engines on the C-54 cargo ships that the Air Force had taken over during the war from the Pan American Airlines, I believe, or Trans World. We done that for months. And we kept trying to get out of the service, and they kept us there to work on the planes. Finally, I think it was Drew Pearson, some newsman got a hold of the story and wrote it up. And they got us out of there, discharged us. They're going to buy an old car to come home, but it's too expensive.
So you went back to, was it Devens you went back to, or?
Yeah,
To
got discharged out of Devens. They wouldn't rent you a car in Florida. I tried to rent a car. You've been in the service? Yeah. They're afraid you're going to take off and never come back with it, which we would have probably.
Now you said they gave you new uniforms and then discharged you.
Yeah, we got new uniforms, new clothes. I don't know why, because then we were out of service. That's when they tried to hire us to work for Pan American, or Pratt Whitney. They offered us jobs, $20,000 a year.
And you said they had German prisoners there, didn't they?
They had German prisoners. They were very nice. They worked in the mess hall. They would dish us out our food when we got through, and if you asked for more, they'd give you plenty. And they also done tailor work, some of them. They'd sew your stripes on your uniforms, and when they weren't busy, they'd be out in the street naming the kind of cars going by. They thought it was very interesting. They were nice. Most of them could talk English.
Now, so you got discharged and you went back home to Lennoxdale with your family?
Yeah, went back to Lennoxdale.
And they said, or you mentioned that you ended up with a total of how many hours flying?
I think it was 1,700.
Total hours?
But I'm not sure if that included our sea searches and everything, but about close to 600 were combat hours.
And of the 40 men that went over, how many came back?
As far as I was told, of course they got separated and everything, but there was only 18 of us got back. And 8 of them were our crew, so you can see we were lucky.
And the plane you originally went over on, 331, what happened to that plane?
As far as I know, it was shot down. I was told it crashed somewhere. And they said I don't know if, I heard 2 stories. One was that they'd saved 3 or 4 of the crew. Other one, that they all got killed. But we never flew their own plane. We'd fly in whichever plane was available. When I first went over there, the pilots and co-pilots were first and master sergeants. They weren't commissioned. They'd offer them a commission 3 times, and the 3rd time they had to accept it. They took a cut in pay by doing it, because they had to pay for their own food and clothes and stuff. Some of those old pilots could fly planes, so before I went overseas, they used B-17s. They were all parked in the jungle, sitting there rusting. And we asked them about them. They said the 24s, they turned out to be more, they could go farther, longer missions. And they turned over to 24s.
So once you got back home, did you go back to work?
The first winter I lived with my brother in Beckett, and he had a couple rabbit dogs. And I hunted all winter long. Shot a couple wildcats and a bunch of white rabbits and stuff like that. Enjoyed myself that winter. Then I joined what they call the 5220 Club. Did you ever hear of that?
No, I never heard of that one.
Anybody who was in the service and got out back at the end of World War II, you could get $20 a week for 52 weeks. You get a check every month. But you had to go to the employment office and tell them you was willing and able to work but couldn't find no work. So we done that for almost a year.
And you bought yourself a car, you said.
Bought a new Chevrolet, brand new. Had to wait a year for that. I put in for a Plymouth in Tillison's in Lennoxdale, Mass. And it finally come in, and he called me up. We got a car for you, but you got to turn your old one in. I had a 37 Chevrolet, a Ford V8, a gray Ford. And I says, no, my younger brother wants the Ford. So he said, you can't have the Chevrolet or the Plymouth. So then the Chevrolet come in, the South Street Chevrolet, and I bought that. $1,100 or $1,200. Yeah.
So then you eventually went back to work?
Oh yeah. Eventually everybody has to work, I suppose. Yeah, I work for Lane Construction. Then when I got married, worked for Lane Construction over in New York. Then afterwards we moved to Chester, and I worked for Lane Construction there. Worked in sawmills. Worked on the Cleveland Dam. Then I was getting through with the Cleveland Dam, and I put my name in on the state back in when I come out of the service. I never went near them because I always had a job. So I went up to Pittsfield, and he says, you're the oldest one on the list, because they had the old little tiny cards. Then now they had the big ones. I went to work on the state in '49. I worked there 37 years, state highway.
Now you mentioned you married.
Yeah, I got married in '46.
So you celebrated your 60th this year.
Yeah, I had a 60th wedding anniversary.
And how many children did you have, Jim?
Had 2 boys and 2 girls.
Did you ever belong to any veterans groups?
I used to belong to the Dalton Legion. Then when I moved to Pittsfield one time, I dropped out and I never joined it again. I had a chance to join the VFW over here, but I'm getting too old for that now.
Did you ever see any of the men you were with?
I met the navigator in Pittsfield. His name was Sullivan. And he said he tried to get in touch with the rest of the crew. And he says, you're the only one I found. I don't know what he was doing in Pittsfield. I didn't ask him, but he was up here on business, I guess.
So what do you think your experiences had a negative or positive effect on your life since the war?
On the long range, I think it was positive. I see country I'd never seen before and experiences that I'd probably never seen if I hadn't went in the service. But there was at times when I was wishing to go back the other way. Yeah.
Okay, I know you have some pictures of memorabilia that you would like to show and talk about, so why don't we do that now?
All right.
Okay, Jerry, now we got some pictures that you wanted to show us. What are those?
This here is when I was at Lincoln, Nebraska. And it wasn't winter yet, but it was cold. And I was just standing there on the walkway there. They was taking pictures of us. And then we went, this was when I was on KP, sweeping the sidewalks and doing KP duty. A lot of police in the barracks in the area, cigarette butts and stuff. These were the barracks where the cold stoves were.
Where were you in that picture, Jerry? Were you on the end?
Right here with the broom.
You had the broom. And then we went to your crew.
Yeah, this is the crew. This was the pilot. Cheney here. This is the bombardier, Mulholland. This is the co-pilot, Leonard Lakin, and the navigator, Mr. Sullivan. Then we had Veterson as an engineer, myself an engineer, radio operator, another radio operator, gunner, and an armor gunner and a career gunner.
Now, which two did you lose, Jerry?
We lost Veterson on this side and Belts over here.
And the picture above it, that's the plane you flew over on.
This is
isn't
the
it?
plane we flew over on. This is the plane that hit the hailstorm in Texas. You know, they had to put all new edges on it. I think that crashed. The crew, I don't know who was sitting by it that day.
And then the next plane was,
It's the Munda Bell on Munda Island. This was a ship that had 35 missions painted on that, I think, in fives. We flew at least 2 missions on that, maybe more. But that was a very dependable old plane. But it's one of the newer planes because it's got a nose turret.
now just point out the cockpit where the pilot would be and where you were.
Pilot's here and the top turret's right here.
Right behind that.
Yeah, right behind the pilot. Shows it here too, the pilot and co-pilot and the top turret.
And some of these other pictures are of some of the islands you were on. And
Right. This some of our crew here, that's me right in the middle there. But I don't know who these other fellows were.
and this one was apparently a shot down
A
Japanese
Jap plane.
Yeah.
I think that's the one they took the gas out of. Tried to see if it'd work in American planes.
It wouldn't
This
work,
is a
would it?
native huts.
Now you mentioned they did some work for you once in a while, or not for you, but working on roads and things.
The natives worked on the roads. They had a crew. We had a young native guy that they gave a Jeep to, and he smashed 2 or 3 of them up, but he was a boss. He'd come by and he'd holler in whatever native language it was. They'd all start to work. As soon as he went out of sight, they'd all take off.
Now these are some of the medals that you received. That first one is the Presidential Citation.
This is a unit citation we got for bombing Truck Island.
And then your Good Conduct Medal.
Good Conduct Medal here.
And that was the next one is it says World War II medal.
Yeah, World War II medal.
And then your Air Medal.
Air medal with 8 oak leaf clusters.
And that was the Asiatic Pacific. Is that
Yeah, Asiatic Pacific. And then there's one for the rifle carbines.
And that one's a pistol one.
Yeah, pistol one. Marksman was a pistol.
And then we have some newspaper clippings that your mom saved.
Yeah, she saved
various
these years ago.
Picture of you there.
Yeah, that's me in my uniform, and I think that was taken in Lincoln, Nebraska, too. That's where we had 51 missions and discharged. This more or less the same thing. This where we come back from bombing Truck. We lost a lot of planes that day.
And those patches, that's what you wore on your
Yeah,
shoulder?
Yeah, their left shoulder patches showed what Air Force we was in. New Guinea had 5th Air Force, and they had the 8th in Europe and 7th in the Pacific. This is the smallest The Air Force there was, I believe,
Mhm.
as far as the number of planes go.
Okay, well, Jerry, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your experiences, and thank you so much for your sacrifices and courage for the service to your country. And we really appreciate you coming and
Thank
doing
you.
this for us. Thank you very much.
Poetry in motion. Poetry in motion. Walking by my side. Her lovely locomotion keeps my eyes open wide. Poetry in motion. See her gentle sway. All wave out on the ocean. Could never move that way. I love every movement. There's nothing I would change. She doesn't need improvement.
Women will survive severe heart attacks. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Eating a handful of nuts every day along with the right diet could help fight heart disease. A study in the Archives of Internal Medicine finds that nuts combined with the Mediterranean diet, which is rich in fruit, vegetables, and fish, is more effective than a low-fat diet. Researchers find that